So we are coming towards the end of this one-day conference, and of which this is the third and last session of speakers. The title of this session is Space, Performance and Narration, Actor and Architect. Since I can see some students also here, I'll make a brief background in Marathi first. जसं सतीश आळेकर नेहमी म्हणत असतात की नाटकामध्ये नट अभिनय करतो, बाकी जी इतर तांत्रिक अंग आहेत, नेपथ्य, प्रकाश योजना, वेशभूषा, रंगभूषा, या अभिनय करू शकत नाही. म्हणजेच आळेकरांच्या मते नाटकातला नॅरेटिव्हचा सगळ्यात मोठा सोर्स जो आहे, सगळ्यात मोठा स्रोत जो आहे, तो ॲक्टर हा आहे. त्याच्या दुसऱ्या बाजूला आपल्याला एडवर्ड गॉर्डन क्रेग दिसतो, जो त्याचं रंगभूमीवरच्या व्हिज्युअल्सच्या बाबतीत म्हणणं मांडताना त्याला नटांचीच अडचण होते आणि नटांच्या ऐवजी काही मॅरिनेट्स वापरायचं तो म्हणतो. आणि कारण नट हे इम्पल्सिव्ह असतात, ते बोलतात, ते हालचाल करतात, त्याच्याऐवजी ज्यांना कंट्रोल करू शकू अशा बाहुल्या आपल्याला वापरायला हव्यात असं क्रेग म्हणतो. ह्या दोघांचा उल्लेख करण्याचं कारण आता हे जे सेशन आपल्या समोर उलगडणार आहे आणि त्याच्यात आजचे जे दोन स्पीकर ज्याच्याविषयी बोलणार आहे की नरेशनमधनं नेहमीच स्टोरी सांगितली जाते असं नाही, पण स्टोरीच नसेल तर ते नरेशन कसं असेल. भारतीय रंगभूमीचा विचार करता मराठी रंगभूमीवर ही कल्पना लक्षात येणं जरा अवघड आहे, कारण गेली 250 वर्ष नाटककार ज्याच्या केंद्रभागी आहे अशा मराठी रंगभूमीवरची नाटकं आपण करत आलेलो आहोत आणि पाहत आलेलो आहोत. आणि नाटककार केंद्रस्थानी असल्यामुळे रंगभूमीवरचा शब्द हाच आपल्यासाठी महत्त्वाचा ठरलेला आहे आणि सगळ्यात आधी शब्द येतो. शब्द हा आपला कुठल्याही परफॉर्मन्सचा स्टार्टिंग पॉईंट असतो आणि तो शब्द मग आता कसा अर्थपूर्ण करावा किंवा त्याचं कसं इंटरप्रिटेशन करावं, म्हणजेच नाटक करणं ही आपल्याकडची गेल्या 150-200 वर्षातली परंपरा आहे. दिग्दर्शकांचंही तेच म्हणणं राहिलेलं आहे आणि त्याच पद्धतीनं नाटकं सादर झालेली असल्यामुळे प्रेक्षकांनाही तसंच वाटत आलेलं आहे. आणि ह्या पार्श्वभूमीवर आता जिथे नाटकच नाही आहे, नाटकात नाटककारच नाही आहे, नाटकाला शब्दच नाही आहे, अशा वेळी जेव्हा हे स्टेज एलिमेंट्स येतात आणि काहीतरी सांगू पाहतात, काहीतरी नरेट करू पाहतात, तेव्हा त्याचा काय अर्थ होतो याच्या संदर्भातलं विवेचन आता आपल्या पुढे मांडलं जाणार आहे. स्पेस, सिनिक डिझाईन, लाईट्स, ह्या अशा अनेक वेगवेगळ्या गोष्टी आर द फॅक्टर्स विच try to narrate the story in one hand. On another hand, when there is no story, when there is no play, but still there are those kinds of elements. I remember some scenic designs done by Swedish designer Joseph Svoboda. When he was a scenic designer and gradually he started doing scenic designs apart from plays, when there are no plays or theatrical performances, and started showing those scenic designs. So here we have our two visual artists as speakers, and first we start from Anubha Fatehpuria. Anubha Fatehpuria is a multifaceted personality in theatre. She is actor, she is director, she is space designer. She has acted in films and television media also. She is trained Hindustani vocalist under the great Guru Girija Devi ji. She has undergone the training in dances as well, various kinds of styles, Bharatnatyam, Manipuri and Mohiniyattam. She is architect by profession and won many awards for her architectural design. And she is recipient of Bismillah Khan Yuva Puraskar by Sangeet Natak Academy. And today, she will share her observations and comparisons between actor as a space in performance and an architectural space in performance. So, Anubha. And Sharmistha's cheat has created a threat to all speakers. So, I do not wish to give any kind of threat. Just keep in mind that we have to end this session at 6 o'clock. There are two speakers and we have only 1 hour.
Sure. We'll try.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we have the slide? Thank you, Praveen, and thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you to the Ashok, the Ranade Trust and Ashutosh. It's given me a chance to, since morning, actually learn more, and I'd just be here sharing a few things that I have experienced while being an architect and an actor and practicing both together. Since we've got the time threat on our heads, I'd just start as soon as we can have this slide, first slide, and actually we can, yeah, the next slide, please. So looking at, based on my experiences, I share some observations and comparisons between an actor as a space in performance and an architectural space in performance. And for today's session, I would be concentrating only on spaces that are being built for theatre specifically. Next slide, please. When we watch a performance performed by an actor or actors, it is a narrative that we are watching. The narrative is a combination of the presence or absence of text, design, lights, sound, costumes, set, movement, props presented in a space. The performance also represents another narrative. Next slide, please. That of its rehearsal process, which in turn is also a combination of the presence or absence of text, design, light, sound, sets, movement, props. Now, each of these elements can be looked upon as a space or a volume or a facility. Of course, each can be a narrative in itself, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about. All of these above elements seen as space or volume or facility are carefully arranged by the director to construct a narrative, which is the performance that the audience is watching, in order to communicate. Now, using his intellect and instinctive understanding of all these various elements, content and emotion, this process of arranging or designing by the director to construct a performance using the actor as a vehicle is a narrative or can be looked upon as a narrative in itself. Next. While viewing a performance, each audience member, the audience members receiving of and responding to the performance is a narrative that is being created while watching the performance, thus generating multiple narratives simultaneously while watching performance. Next. Architecture is a 360-degree visual narrative when viewed from outside. it is a combination of covered, semi-open and open spaces, and when viewed together, we look at it as a built form. Next. This built form, again, in turn represents another narrative, that of its design process and its construction process, which in turn is a combination of ideas, concepts, requirements, usages, services, facilities, timelines in a construction process. Each of the above element, again, we can look upon them as a space or a volume notionally and physically and facility. All of these above elements seen as space, volume, facility are carefully arranged by the architect to arrive at a design and a construction process for the building in order to fulfill a purpose that it is built for. Now, using his or her intellect and instinctive understanding of all these volumes, facilities, and ideas, this design process and the construction process is also a narrative in itself. Next. While using the building, each user's usage of the building and each user's perspective of the building, depending on where that user is located vis-a-vis that particular built form, each one is creating its own visual narrative with that building, therefore generating multiple visual narratives. So in both cases, to me it seems that the actor in the built form is only a vehicle or a carrier, representing the process narrative and becoming a storyboard for the perceived narrative or the viewed narrative. Now, when we go to watch a performance of a style which is known to us, in that case we go with partial knowledge of the narrative that we are going to watch, which is at least we know the style that we are going to watch. So in that case, what happens is what we are about to watch can only enhance our experience, and it can create pleasure or disappointment in us based on our expectation of that style which we already know. And in which case, we are not going to watch really an actor A or B or C's work. We are watching how proficient an actor A or B or C may be in that particular style, in the same role, in that same play, or the excellence of how well he or she can deliver that particular style. And we are revisiting a known narrative actually. Similarly, when we go to a place of worship, we go with the visual narrative already known to us. We know what a place of worship will more or less look like. We are conditioned towards that. So in that case, what happens is we know the visual narrative, we know the associations, we know what we are going to experience, how the experience will unfold when we walk from one space to the other. And our experience may be enhanced by how overwhelming the ornamentation of that particular space is. And I particularly choose these two examples to show over here because they are far more contemporary. I am not talking about places of worship that were built way beyond, because they have a reason for why they were built like they were built then, because the building systems, the materials used were very, very in context. But these are largely concrete sort of buildings which have ornamentations on the built form, which is camouflaging really the built form. They are not load-bearing structures. They are not true to what you see. So in which case, that's why I call, all the work on it is ornamentation. Secondly, even the carvings and, things like that which are done on places of worship, at that time there is this school of thought which is believed that it was basically to remind the devotees when they were entering to leave all, material things outside and enter just as a devotee. It was very true to the context and their times. If we were to do that today in our places of worship, I would think that carvings should probably also include mobile phones and guns and iPads. And because that is the times that we are living in, and then we should be talking about leaving that behind while entering. Next, please. In each case, again, I feel that the actor and the built form is only a carrier. In case of, while you're going and watching a performance in a particular style, or if you're going to, for example, a place of worship where the narrative is known to you. Similarly, if we now look at performance spaces, which are like our auditoriums, we go to an auditorium, a typical auditorium, we know the narrative of the space. We know that we enter a foyer space, we enter a seating space, there is a stage, there are wings, there is backstage. And once the performance starts, the built form is rendered meaningless. Similarly to once we enter a place of worship and we focus on the deity, the built form is rendered meaningless. We can take the deity out and place it anywhere else. It will mean the same to us. It doesn't change anything. So then what is the built form doing? It begs the question. Similarly, in a performance space, then what, we have all these panelings and carpeting and these ornamentations that are done in an auditorium, and we are spending a lot of money making our auditoriums like that, especially the proscenium stages. So it does beg the question that how really relevant are these ornamentations and these, the frills and the paraphernalias in an auditorium, because once the performance starts, that's where we are concentrating on. Secondly, the built form is in no way contributing to the performance that is happening on stage. I can take this performance out anywhere and place it in any auditorium and experience it exactly in that same way. And I'm not talking about site-specific performances here, because that's a different thing altogether. So leaving that question here, I'll move on and we come back to it. Next, please. Now, if we take away all the ornamentation from a built form, let's say spaces of worship, and we just leave the built form exposed, then we can have examples like the Baha'i temple or the Matra Mandir in Auroville. And in terms of theatre spaces, we can look at a Prithvi theatre, which is popularly known to everyone. And the other space is the Padatik little theatre space where rehearsals and shows happen regularly in Calcutta. So they are basically just bare spaces with the bare facilities that are required, because they understand what is really the focal activity that needs to be happening inside. And I have often wondered that with too much of ornamentation in such spaces and too much of unnecessary elements, are we really distracting the audience? Are the performers really having to pitch against everything that is around? I always feel that the performers are having to pitch against all that. We'll have to sort of darken that. We have to find a way of, having them recede so that you can concentrate on that one thing that you've come for. And here I would like to quote a Japanese architect, Tadao Ando, who says, if you give people nothingness, they can ponder what can be achieved from that nothingness. Similarly, if we were to take away everything from the actor, if we were to take away, apart from the content, if we were to take away the text, the lights, the sound, costume, props, etc., and then if the actor is just left with the content to work on, I think we go back to what we understand as the nutter. And so there we have just an actor and just the content, and the actor needs to do his or her work as nutter. And then of course we have these several other things that can be brought in at a later stage. And that work I have found in my doing theatre in all these years somehow get lost. And yes, we also say that, okay, there is not enough time because we are just mounting this play in 2 months or 3 months, and we have to look at this and we have to look at that. So maybe in the time span of a play, it may seem that, oh, that's too detailed a work to do. But if an actor looks at from where they start from the first play to the n number of plays that they do, that's quite a journey for an actor to find for herself or himself. And, okay, we come to that next. So we also move to a tradition that we are familiar with when we talk about Natta. Now, talking about tradition, we are very familiar in our country, for sure, with performances happening in the round, or at least three-sided performances. Next. In which case, now, my interest is to look at two things. One is the possibility of greater participation by the actor and by the built form itself. Next. Sorry. Now, if an actor were to perform just instinctively, guided by emotions, the performance growth or graph, I feel, coming from personal experience, and this is how I used to perform when I just started acting, is the same as that, as we find the growth in nature, like that of tree. And it may be also considered analogous to installation by an architect, or not a building which is to serve a purpose, not using intellect really as such towards a purpose. But, next. If the actor uses the self as a space to design a performance, using intellect along with emotion, even if it be within the parameters of the body and the parameters laid down by the director and the parameters of the play and the design, then the actor's performance, I think, becomes completely human, because the actor is using all of his or her faculties to design a performance. And the performance growth graph is far more observed, far more considered by the actor. For example, if the director asks the actor to move from point A to B, we can just move from point A to B within that real time. But as an actor, today I feel that it's far more interesting for me, instead of just presenting a performance to the audience, what am I coming out of it, out of the rehearsal process with? What is my takeaway? Of course, the audience has a takeaway. The director has said what the director has to say. What is the actor coming out with at the end of the entire process? So for me, that is very interesting now to see that from point A to point B, if I have to just move, I have this whole space. I have my limbs, my nails, hair, eyes, face, teeth. That's a huge set of elements to consider, to work on, and to design that movement from A to B. And then if we look at working like that on an entire piece, and we look at working like that from play to play, that's a lot of work that an actor can put on oneself. Now, and I also feel that, that is where you start also recognizing an actor A from an actor B, from an actor C, in the same play, in the same role, in exactly the same design, and exactly the same parameters set out by the director. No, can we just also go back to the... So, all right, we've sort of cut off the visual from top somehow. But, so yes, so I've just tried to detail out as to what are the things you can work with, and it just doesn't stop there. It's also then your negotiation with the space and the set and the prop as well. It's like literally like a slow-mo stretching out a moment and looking at how you want to, what you as an actor want to bring to it. Next. So, a built form itself can be a narrative, a focal point, a living organism. It can be a character. A built form itself can keep changing through the day depending on its coordinates. And as also an architect, I do believe that coordinates are very essential to designing a space, because to me it doesn't make sense that if I have designed a building, let's say in Pune, and if I can just place it exactly in Calcutta, and if I can just place it exactly in Delhi, I think we're just completely missing out the point. In that case, very soon we will stop recognizing city from city. That association of its microclimate and its coordinates is important to me. And that's how I have looked at designing spaces and even spaces for performance. Next, please. Over here, I'd like to just sort of, as an example, use these images of Tadao Ando's Church of Light. As we can see over here, and I'll just sort of now move. Hello? Yeah. In this Church of Light, he's obviously taken off the deity, and he's used the built form itself starts performing. And the users are obviously forced to interact with the built form. As you can see, because as the sun changes, the space, the character of the space also starts changing. And over here we have these walls which direct the users, they tell you how to walk through that space, how to negotiate. So from the moment that someone's entering, you are constantly in conversation, you're constantly listening to what the built form has to say to you. And it's completely stripped off of any decorations, any ornamentations, any such thing. It's purely a conversation between the user and the built form. Next. Similarly, Peter Zumthor's museum in Austria. This is what it looks like during the daytime. This is what the outside looks like during the evening. And he's designed this entire facade in glass because it reflects, again, how the sun moves, what kind of light is entering inside. So there is a very direct interaction that the users, the activity inside is happening, is taking place with the built form. This is the suspended ceiling which the museum has, which is a glass museum. And so this entire light that enters gets diffused and falls into the entire museum space. And therefore, you cannot take both these buildings out and place it anywhere else. It is very much place specific, it is very much coordinate specific, it very much responds to the way the sun moves. And so I think it's really, the built form is very true to its coordinates and to its activities, and the users are constantly having to interact with it. Next. Yeah, so I've already said that you can't take them out and place it anywhere else. Similarly, I feel now for performance spaces, if we were to design a performance space, just, that it does give the option to the practitioners, to the theatre practitioners, and also to the audiences to be able to interact with the performance spaces. It's not enough, I feel, anymore for performance spaces to be just, I can perform it here, I can take it out and perform it there. The audience has exactly the same. They don't remember where they have seen it. Neither can the practitioners interact with the built form. So our little effort in some of the performance spaces have been, next please. This was a project we did, which is for the Calcutta Improvement Trust. And in the Rabindra Sarovar, the lakes and the gardens, they wanted a performance space. And so they came and they said that, okay, we are building this concrete platform, which is a 3 feet high concrete platform in the middle of the Maidan. We said, no, nothing doing. You don't need to do any such thing, because they have this absolutely fantastic background of the lake and the trees. So we said, all you need to do is, they have this jogging path. So we sloped it very gradually across the length, and during the daytime when people are using it as a jogging path, you don't even sort of recognize that it is anything else but a jogging path. And in the evenings when they actually set it up for a performance is when you notice the elevation in the jogging path. And then that becomes the stage. So sometimes it is just about actually just listening to what the surroundings are saying to you and just not doing much as an architect. You don't always have to do much. It's also sometimes about how less you do with a space. And of course, the shadows of the trees and things like that, they all interfere with the performance and become a part of the performance. So it's the entire ambience in that case. This is another project which is called Miraki, which is an arts residency in Himachal, which is coming up. I will just concentrate on design points which are related to this discussion. So over here we have this open air performance space which is absolutely looking onto the valley. And yes, the performers have a tough job to do on this stage because they are pitched against that entire mountain range and valley. But the audience seating has been sort of carved out very naturally as the contours are. We've just dressed the contours. We have not tried to bring them to a regular level of like tiered seating as we find here. So in this case, what happens is the audience is seated very organically and they will be viewing the same performance actually from very different viewpoints and very different angles. So a set of 4 will be watching a very different kind of visual narrative of the performance from 4 people who would be sort of, sitting at an eye level and watching it. So that's the interesting, we feel, a negotiation that's going to happen. Next. This is an amphitheater space, which was a semi-open amphitheater, which was already built and given to us. And the job was to sort of enclose it for Delhi's summer. But we didn't want to completely enclose it and then make another auditorium because it also extends into this lovely garden space that we have. So, and again, also drawing from tradition and looking at indigenous materials, what we did was we just hung, we enclosed it with 2 sets of blinds, bamboo blinds. One is, the khas chicks, as we understand, and the other bamboo blinds. So there is an internal layer of black bamboo blinds, and this is yet to be painted black, so the inside can turn into a black box. And the outside are these chicks which can be wet during the summers. And so you don't have to, take the recurring cost of huge volume of air conditioning. You can do with minimal air conditioning for those 3-4 months. And yet you can roll them up and it can become an amphitheater and extend to the garden space outside. So it's really how the practitioner wants to use the space. It's not that, the practitioner enters, looks at a space and says, okay, that's where I need to do my performance and that's it, and that's where the audience needs to sit. These spaces can be arranged any way that the director or the actor wants to arrange them and use them. So it does allow that facility. Even the stage is a modular stage, which is, different platforms, wooden platforms, which can be sort of, set up in different levels. You can use them as set. You can, make a flat space and use it. Next. This is Usha Ganguly's space in Calcutta, the Rangakarmi Theatre. And she just had a rehearsal space and she wanted, as a lot of the theatre groups are facing that, how do we sort of book auditoriums, how do we perform there, and how do we meet the economic, the financials, and etc., etc. So, facing that ourselves at Padatik, where we are rehearsing and performing, I feel that a lot of theatre groups in India have small spaces now, and they should start recognizing the potential of their own space, because their own space can actually help them put up small performances for smaller audiences. If we just look at how to, use them in multiple ways. So we gave her this seating, which can also, these are like box seats, you can put stuff inside, and so that also takes care of, her storage requirements that she needed. She had a corridor which was actually just a dump yard for her touring productions, trunks. And so we turned that into a cafe and a foyer space for her inside space where the audience now waits. And all these trunks are actually trunks of her regular productions which she travels with. And we turned them into tabletops with display of her material to do with her group and her productions over the years. Because that's another thing which I feel is missing in a lot of the theatre groups and their spaces. They don't display their entire history and their entire body of work, which I feel is very important, because young theatre enthusiasts who walk into the space, they immediately get a sense of the history and the work that they are going to be engaging with. So if we can also find, such little areas or corners or walls or tabletops where we can display and talk about the work that has been done. Next, please. This is the Shamananjalan Rooftop Theatre. Before he passed away, he had this dream of building a rooftop theatre, and this essentially was his design, which we executed, and this was again absolutely, it's all flexible. All this entire seating system can be sort of, it can be wheeled away, it can be, it collapses into just, platforms. And can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, so it can be a one-sided viewing, it can be people seated anywhere and the performance happening in the round. It can just be stacked away and it can be used as a terrace space for rehearsals and workshops. And over here, two-sided, and people can be performing in the middle. So so again, you're giving the option. You're giving, as a designer, you are not imposing a space onto the practitioners, but you're telling them that you can do this, or you can do anything else, which I have not thought of if the director or the practitioner enters and wants to use it in any other way. This is a design, we've proposed this design for the Tagore Cultural Complex. Here I'd just like to mention probably 2 or 3 things. One is that, the design is in several planes and several levels. And there are a lot of these open decks in order to encourage dialogue between people. They're not sort of all closed, confined spaces, which I think is very important for a performing arts space or a space for arts. And the other thing which over here has been tried is that this completely, all the spaces, there is a thrust stage auditorium over here, a 200-seater thrust stage auditorium. There are 2 black box theaters, there are 3 small studio theaters, and there is an amphitheater as well. But they are all absolutely connected, even physically, not just visually, design-wise. So imagining or giving the option that if there are audiences seated everywhere, let's say, the actor can actually move from one space to the other, performing to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. If I feel designers can start thinking or start approaching performance spaces like this, where the built form can keep changing or allow for several ways of using it, we'll be giving them, we'll be doing justice to our theatre practitioners, because theatre practitioners can really actually need no space, and they have such a great way, we have such a great way of just setting up and start performing, that I feel that our proscenium spaces are actually confining them and limiting them. We need to actually sort of help them in realizing how they want to use spaces and place their performances in built forms. Yeah, I think that's it, actually. Thank you. So between trying to create durable, permanent architectural structures and moving in the temporary buildings of her performances, she enjoys creating the first to stay and to be viewed at a specific site, and the latter to dissolve only to be staged and viewed again at another site. Thank you.